Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's program. I'm Jim Boyd, co-chair of the Greater Rochester Quality Council, which is an affiliate of the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce. Before we begin, I'd like to announce that today's Performance Excellence Forum is being recorded, and the recording, as well as the presenter's deck, will be posted to the GRQC website. Closed captioning is available for this program. To enable it on your device, click on the CC icon on your screen. Also, out of respect for other participants, we asked everyone to go on mute at this time.
Very good.
GRQC's mission is to stimulate and foster excellence in the products, services, and processes of all organizations and businesses in our community. The council is made up of members who are dedicated to collaboration and to the demonstration of proven quality improvement methods. We invite you to visit our website at www.grqc.org to learn more and check out future events. A few upcoming programs I'd like to highlight. On Wednesday, November 15th, Rock Excellence 2023 is a full-day conference at the RIT Convention Center, being coordinated by our partner, ASQ Rochester. You can find out more information and register for that at asqrochester.org. On Thursday, November 16th, is GRQC's annual Healthcare Forum. Healthcare Forum 2023's topic is driving organizational culture change. And on Wednesday, November 29th, is our next GRQC Performance Excellence Forum titled Smart Machines and AI, Their Implications for Quality Management. Okay, so on to today's event. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us at today's forum titled Sensory Analysis and Quality Assessment for Food and Beverage. Our speaker today, Matt Conyer, wants to encourage your questions and plans to leave plenty of time for discussion. We invite everyone to submit questions in real time by entering them into the Zoom chat. We will be holding all questions for discussion at the end of the presentation. So we got about 30 minutes of presentation materials, and then the remaining time for questions and dialogue. All right, so at this time, it's my privilege to introduce GRQC board member Eric Alden, who will introduce our speaker and also serving as moderator for today's discussion.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you very much. We are very honored and pleased today to host Matt Conyer. He's the CEO and founding partner of Draught Lab, and this is a Rochester-based startup company that helps food and beverage producers improve the taste and quality of their products. And so with a background in software engineering, Matt went on to start Draught Lab in 2016. And that's a collaboration with sensory scientists who tested their new software by starting tasting programs with local Rochester businesses. Since then, Draught Lab has grown to support tasting programs in over a dozen countries and won a prize at the 2021 Grow New York Business Competition. So we are pleased to there and welcome Matt, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Let me share my screen here real quick. Okay, so well, thank you so much, first off, for this opportunity. It's always really great to speak with, first of all, like-minded people, but also just anything in the Rochester area. As someone that grew up here, lives here now, my kids are here. These are always special things for me to do. And also just, thank you to everyone taking time out of their lunch on a 70-degree day in late October, Rochester. That's that's a high honor. So thank you for that. But today we're going to be talking about, like the title says, sensory analysis and quality assessment. Specifically with food and beverage, it's not actually sensors that are placed in a production facility. It's actually about using human tasters and things like that. So let's dive in. So again, my name is Matt Conyer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Draught Lab, Rochester-based company since 2016. We build sensory analysis tools, primarily software, but also consulting and some other things that help out. But again, this is about using taste panels, focus groups, people to actually measure something that's really hard to measure in food and beverage, which is flavor. Since we started, we've grown up. We were an award winner at Grow New York. My co-founder, Lindsay Barr, who is a sensory scientist, she was named top 75 people in the country as a tastemaker by Imbibe magazine. We have run hundreds and hundreds of taste panels in many different types of food. We got our start in beer, hence the name Draught Lab. But since then, we have kind of done anything from oysters to chocolate to meats to MREs, pretty much anything under the sun that gets made in food and beverage is going to have a sensory component to it. So I'm going to go through a few different things, going to walk through some of the industry background of food and beverage, particularly how it relates to sensory and the stuff that we do. We're going to talk about sensory science as a discipline. We're going to talk about some of the applications of sensory analysis in these companies, certainly how to run a quality control test and how some of these methods are actually used, and certainly go through some examples as well. Okay, so first thing here, this is kind of a breakdown of different food and beverage producers in the United States by size. And so myself, coming to this industry from software, in fact, I spent over a decade in the railroad business working on basically highly secure systems. This was kind of a big shock. And the thing that I took away from it was, most of the food and beverage producers in this country are actually pretty small. 84% of them have less than 50 employees. In fact, almost 40% of them have fewer than 5. So if you think about the sizes of these companies that are making them, there's very few that are these kind of multi-site behemoths that are out there. And this is really important for sensory and quality control, because all of these companies need some form of it, yet they're going to need something that's more suited to where their business is at. And in which case, a lot of them are going to be smaller. The second thing that was really surprising about the industry to me was the fact that for new products that are brought into industry, into grocery stores, 70 to 80% is the product failure rate. So 7 or 8 out of 10 products are probably not going to be there in about 2 years. And a further study was done. And if you break that down even a little bit further, if you're one of the top companies, then you're running at 24% failure rate. Everyone else is almost at 9 out of 10. So it's a really tough business. And if you think about going into a grocery store and seeing how much competition there is on shelves, you may only get one opportunity with somebody to actually make a difference and get a repeat customer. And so we kind of had to think to ourselves, what makes these top companies so much better at it? And of course, there is marketing and budgets and brand recognition, and all of those things go into it, and they're huge. But one of the other things is a lot of these companies really put the time and effort in to make sure that their products are set up to succeed, and that it's stuff that people want, and that it's stuff that they can produce, so that there are fewer surprises when they get out there. And so this is also kind of the need for that quality control piece in the industry. All right, so as I'm sure most people can understand, if there are quality issues, with your product, if you're in food and beverage, it's really going to have an impact from everything that I just said. So consumers may only give you one shot. You could raise problems with your leadership team, investors, especially if you're a small company. That's a big deal. And at its worst, it can have legal implications because you don't want to make someone sick or have something bad happen. The picture on the left, this is a picture that had been kind of handed down, but company was going to do a market study on some chocolate bars, or I don't even know if these are chocolate bars, but so they had a bunch, they're running the study, they ran out, they go to the store, they pick up a bunch of new ones, and lo and behold, they look completely different. They're the ones on the left. So this study that they're actually running turned into a de facto study on quality and the impact that it would have on their product. And lo and behold, when the product looks a little bit different, it had a drastic impact on the reaction from consumers. So these things do happen. This was actually a very limited run or a very limited thing that happened, but it's important to kind of see how the swirls were different and what that kind of does. Okay, so sensory science is a word I've thrown around a few times already. It is a field of study. It is a combination of life sciences and behavioral science. And essentially, it focuses on how do we understand, and important for this measure, human responses to stimuli. So sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing, all of those things. And for this part, again, with something like flavor, which is an important part of any food and beverage, being able to measure that is very difficult. Humans are still one of the best options. We have trillions of, we can detect at, I think, parts per trillion or something like that in our tongues. We're very complicated measuring tools. So sensory science is how do we get people to act more like measuring tools to actually measure the food and beverage that's out there. So if we take this piece of chocolate and we start to think about all of the different things that actually make it up, if I hold it in my hand, how heavy is it? Is it salty? I could tell you if it's bitter. I can detect that. The melt rate in my mouth, nuttiness. There is a whole host of things that people could go through and actually measure this with some training and with some organization. And so oftentimes sensory testing, which is essentially asking people what reading they get on a product, will be of two different types. First, what do you detect? I taste it. It tastes bitter. That's a detection. The other one is, well, how much do you like it? Which is a completely subjective term. So sensory, most times will separate those two things into two different sections. And the goal is to reduce bias and to ask things in a way so we can get usable data to make decisions. Okay, so sensory in kind of the product cycle, it's really used all throughout. So if we were thinking about making a new product, we're in the concept phase. Let's say we're going to make a brand new salsa. Well, what should a salsa taste like that is going to be successful out in the market? What do our consumers want to taste? What other salsas are out there and are successful? What are the key components of those things? Sensory helps answer a lot of those questions. So there will be market research studies, prototypes will be tested, and we'll be asking a lot of those how much do you like it questions so that we can figure out, do we have the right thing here? Oftentimes those would be done with consumers. And at that point, consumers are less trained, but they're totally trained on what they like. Everybody is. So typically you'll see 30 to 50 people will be, polled for these types of questions in these studies kind of going forward. Once you kind of know what you're going to make, you say, all right, we got the right salsa. We know what we're going to do. Well, now we're going to scale up the recipe. And once we actually have this thing in production and package, we're going to need to run quality control on it. And this is the part where we kind of flip over to the, am I detecting that this product tastes the same as it should of what we said we wanted to make from the first steps? So in the scale up phase, there's almost always going to be ingredient substitutions, shelf life. There's going to be a lot of changes that are going to happen, but all throughout, we need to make sure that we're matching flavor so that we can hit that same goal. So we know that this thing can sell. By the time it gets to the quality control part, we need to make sure that every time we're putting this thing out there, it's tasting properly so that when that one time hits that someone tastes it, we can make that impact with them and hopefully they become a repeat customer. So some of the first places people usually go with this, which is, well, what about, analytical chemistry is out there? Why does sensory need to exist if analytical is there? Kind of what's the difference between the two? Well, the reality is that most of the companies that are successful are going to be well balanced between the two. There are some holes on the analytical side that sensory picks up, and there's holes on the sensory side that analytical picks up. So ideally, you have kind of both these things working in concert, or you have a good mix that matches your business goals. So a couple of examples of that. So Halloween's coming up. I recently read an article that was about the Harry Potter jelly beans, where you try them. Some of them taste great. Some of them are really gross flavors, and it's supposed to be a big surprise. Well, one of the ones they wanted as a gross flavor was a sweaty sock. So they literally put a sweaty sock into a GC, ran the analytical on it, got the entire component breakdown of what a sweaty sock is, made it into a food additive, put it in a jelly bean, and had people taste it. And it was blow out your mouth disgusting in ways that are not sweaty sock and are all over the place. So at that point, sensory kind of takes over because you have to make adjustments based on what people are actually going to taste and what the flavor is going to be. Analytical got you part of the way there, but they still needed to make adjustments. And that was where they had people taste things. They did that. The other example that we've had multiple times where companies have reached out to us that may be doing only analytical for some of their quality, and yet the wrong liquid went into the wrong bottle and got sent to the wrong customer. And yet, if people were tasting this every day, it would be the most obvious thing to be able to catch and make sure that stuff doesn't happen, but it can still pass by analytical. So ideally, these things, again, are kind of working with each other and aren't a versus scenario like this. Okay, so we'll kind of get into how some of this testing works and what kind of we do in the sensory space. So as I would imagine, it is important in any quality space. The first thing you have to have is a specification. How is this thing supposed to be? What am I measuring against? I could measure all day long, but I need to know kind of what the gold star is for moving forward. So we use what are called target descriptions, flavor descriptions. On the left there is an example of one that is a beer. It is split up into the different modalities: visual, aroma, taste, and mouthfeel. And this is basically how we want someone to evaluate it. We want them to look at it. We want them to smell it. We want them to taste it. We want them to feel it in their mouth. And what are the key characteristics that need to be there in order for it to be the thing that we want? And this is what we end up training tasters on, is basically what this language is, because flavor is very much a language. So if I say something tastes like rhubarb, I want to make sure that when I say that, you're thinking of the same thing so that we're on the same page. So one of the things that we'll do with that is we have built flavor maps, which are things on the right there, which are like preset language lexicons about flavor for different product categories, so people can kind of get up to speed in the same way. But a couple things to notice that in there, it doesn't say vanilla at an intensity of 9, and I want a 2 on bubblegum and a citrus at a 3. That's really, really specific and takes a lot of specific training. That is a tool. It's called descriptive analysis, where I'm actually scaling intensities of flavors, but that takes a lot of effort to do that and might not be appropriate for what we're doing in the quality control. Because again, what is my 2 on a rhubarb versus your 2? That's really hard to calibrate. That takes testing. So we spend a lot of time with customers building out these targets, because these targets really are where the variance lies, where the specification is, and what they're going to be measuring with a little bit further down the line. So once we have this target, we can run a thing called a true to target test. So one thing that people are really good at is being able to compare two things. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a flavor specification of what it's supposed to taste like with the main points. And then I'm going to give you the actual sample under test. And I'm going to ask you, is this sample within the target specification, true to target? It's a simple test. It's a bread and butter test, but it does have them actually go through, taste it, compare to a spec, and then give me a binary response of yes or no, is this overall within that spec? We do allow comments, some other things, but mainly we're looking for that yes and no. So once we have that, if we want to look at a result, and let's say it was, again, that beer from the very beginning, I have a taste panel, 9 people came. Some places will have everybody show up at the same time every day, go into a sensory booth. They'll be handed a tray. They'll go through their samples, enter in their information into our software or to some other medium. And then someone will tabulate the results. So in this case, we had one person say, yep, it was good to go, but 8 people said no. And so that actually equates to a number, which is percent defect, which is 89% of the people said, no, this thing is not okay. Something's up here. When they do say no, we force them to give us some comments so that we can actually get some troubleshooting data to go along with it. So in this case, if I'm looking at this beer, people say stale, there's no citrus, it's missing floral, some of the grapefruit, fruit is subdued. It's actually would be pretty obvious that you might have missed an ingredient when you went through and did this. And in a lot of cases, a missed dry hop, so hopping the beer afterwards might have been something that was missed, and that could actually squeak through analytical and nobody would know. So this would actually flag this sample and let us know, hey, we should go through and see what's going on with this. So this would be an example of one test. But the power of this is, and this is the part where I think people in this group will be more familiar, which is we can use control charts on this data going forward. So in this case, we're using a P chart. And I pulled this P chart a couple of days ago. It's a pretty healthy one. It shows all the results of those true to target tests by that percent defect over time. You can see from the information below, they have 24 tasters every day. That's really great. You kind of want to be up above 10 in order for this stuff to really start to work. But anytime that red line or the percent defect goes above our control limit, we can be reasonably safe in assuming that is an unusual amount of people to say, no, something's wrong with this and we should flag it. On any given day, a taster could have a bad day, be upset. They could have eaten something just before it, or even COVID, become anosmic, and then all of a sudden they can't taste. In fact, a lot of people were finding out they were having COVID because they would go on taste panel, and all of a sudden they couldn't taste anything, and that's when they were really noticing it. But these control charts allow for that variance and basically tell us what is normal for this group. There's always going to be a few people that kind of say no, but we can chart it and look for some of those issues. Another way that we use this chart that's pretty helpful is it's a good indication of the health of the program and the taste panel in general as well. So if that control limit starts to kind of creep up and get towards the top, and it's saying, hey, it's normal for half of my panel to be saying something's wrong with a product. Well, that's probably going to mean one of 3 things. One, your product is highly variable, in which case you better get on that and check it out. Number 2, it could mean you don't have enough tasters going into this. That's an issue. But number 3, the bigger one is your target description may not be calibrated with your equipment, your people that are doing the tasting. So if your target description is really specific, people might not be able to actually hit that target or know what that means, in which case you're going to start getting data that's all over the place. So this means some training or looking at your target descriptions. We can usually go through and calibrate the system based on this. On the flip side, if that thing goes to 0 and everybody's passing everything, well, then we want to make sure that they're kind of staying on their toes. So we do something called a spike sample, and we put something out there that we know is going to fail. and we want to see if they're going to catch it. And if I was in a brewery, I would tell them mix 2 of their beers together, put it out there, and see if they could figure out that that's not a beer that exists at that place. So you should see the spike go up. And if you don't, again, train, go through, talk to people. That's kind of a way that you can have the health of this panel. So this is one example of how this is used. This is, again, I think the bread and butter of what a lot of people are using because it flags things very quickly. But there's certainly some other ones too. So I'm going to come back to this idea, which is, again, the makeup of this industry, going all the way down to the single artisan that is creating, their own products. And if you think of a chef, a chef is trained to taste their food all throughout and to adjust seasoning and make decisions based on flavor. That's a form of sensory. It's one person doing it. It is going to be highly dependent on their skill. It's going to be highly dependent on how they're doing that day. And you kind of go there for the chef for that very reason. Great. Totally fine. And there are some things to take into account with this that are really going to help, especially once that artisan has to take on staff and things have to start to scale up. We see most new customers when they're going through a scale up because that's the moment where all of a sudden more people need to be involved, and yet the quality and the flavor of that needs to stay the same. And sensory really kind of helps with that democratization of that quality piece. That's really important so that these companies can go to the next level. However, if you're just moving from, being a chef and then moving up your system, you're not going to have access to tons of equipment. You're not going to have access to all these other things, but you are going to have people there that can taste. You can very, very quickly start one of these programs or start to think about things in the QC side and get results right away as the other parts start to come up. That kind of mid-sized tier is where Draught Lab does a lot of work. We've adapted a lot of things for that. And then at the large scale, you have multi-site, you have teams of sensory people that are running things every day. They will send cuttings from individual locations to essential locations. They'll do QC studies, all sorts of stuff. And it's probably going to be a lot more specific, and they're going to have more trained tasters because they're going to require a higher level of accuracy. So a quick case study of this, we got invited in to talk with large producer of canned goods. They were doing full analytical, they were doing full sensory checks, they were sending products from their different plants to home base, and they were looking at different ways of doing this. And so we worked with them on their target descriptions. We moved them to this true to target test, which is about quickly flagging things and making sure that that target's really dialed in. And in the first week of running it, they found a packaging defect that had been there for about a month. And it had slipped through their sensory checks from before. It had slipped through analytical. They were able to track that down to a single machine that was out of calibration, fixed it that day. No big deal. The moral of the story, I guess, is making sure that you're really right sizing your quality control and what you're checking with what your needs are, what your equipment is, and most of all, what things are going on with the business. And so this is kind of one of our big sayings that we say in the QC world, and I certainly felt it when I was in the software world too. But sensory itself and doing these measurements, all we're doing is giving data to make really good decisions. The quality person sometimes gets in the line of fire of they're the ones making the decision if something happens. I don't know if that happens a lot in some of these in some of your other places, but we like to say sensory informs, it doesn't make the decision. Our goal is just to make sure that you're making the kind of the best decision for yourself based on as much data as you can and for the decisions that you have to make. So that would be one of the things I would probably leave people with. So that's the high level of sensory. Hopefully there's some questions, and there's so many different avenues to go down with this. If you are curious to learn more, we do have a newsletter where we talk about sensory stuff. And like everyone else on the planet, we have a podcast and we talk about products and different things from a sensory point of view. But I would invite anyone to send a question.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt. That was extremely informational there. I learned a lot, but I can't go through this without coming up with all kinds of questions. So I don't see too many questions on the chat line here, but I'll start a few of them that I have here. I had the pleasure once of working with a fellow named Ralph. And I forget whether it was at Bauschelom or where it was, but he came up with Ralph's hot sauce, and it was a very famous sauce. And Wegmans picked it up, and I think he was very, very pleased to be picked up and have his personal sauce go through there. So that was one of the things that come to mind, of how he must have gone through all this tasting there. And so I thought that was interesting. But specific questions I have for you, Matt, was I wonder about taste fatigue. How do tasters not come up with taste fatigue? If I'm tasting the same thing all day long, I don't know whether I'd be as fresh after a while as I would be in the very beginning. And taste is probably so closely linked to smell. Again, there's sensory fatigue in humans that aren't necessarily in instruments. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so that's a really important part of this whole thing. I mean, again, we are the measuring instruments, so you can't blow out the measuring instrument, otherwise, the data could be affected. In general, what the sensory person will do is make sure that they're pretty careful with how they set up a panel for that day. You don't want too many samples to be on that panel. If you do have too many, you might want to spread it out amongst a couple of days or amongst a couple of different, groups of people if you have to. Ideally, you would put the things that are going to be a lot more subtle up front. So the order is very important with this. So you would ideally stack those things up front, and then the things that are going to be more intensive are going to come later. The other thing with it is it also depends on what test you're having them do. So basically, what type of data or how specific do I want them to be when they're giving me back my data? If I'm doing something like true to target, which is very much yes or no, and usually is a little bit less strict on those things, you could get away with a lot more samples. But if I'm having you do a descriptive analysis where I'm having you actually rank intensities of very specific flavor attributes, that's something that you wouldn't want to kind of overdo. So it's part of the management of putting these things together and the products that you have going on to make sure that you're kind of set up for the best. But it's absolutely a thing that is to take care of.
All right, Krista has a question for you. She's first of all thanking you for an excellent presentation, but asked if you see any fit of AI or artificial intelligence in your business or industry.
Yeah, AI is everywhere, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on it. Yeah, AI is in a couple of different places. One of the big places is going to be on that subjective side that I talked about before. There are companies that are running massive taste panels and collecting flavor data on all these products, and they're using it to train AI models to help tell food and beverage companies what they should be producing and what they think is going to be popular going forward. It's used in a bunch of other places as well. We do get questions on what is, the future of that going to be. I guess if I knew the future of all of it, I'd make $1 billion somewhere and that would be great. But, I think one of the things that's important with this is that these models need to be continually trained in order to be updated, which means there's still tasting that's going to happen as they go forward. The other thing is, remember that a lot of these companies are smaller and they have their own product, and they still need to taste their own product, because even if I worked at a brewery and I hired somebody that knows everything about beer, they still need to come in and learn my products and know what they are. So there always is this kind of human component to it, which is sensory. But we're really curious to see how AI is going to change things and kind of where it's going. And as in most places, it's already started.
All right. Dick asks if there's such a thing as a professional tester. Is there someone known to be so accurate and reliable that he's in high demand across companies? that want to use them often, or do you look for randomly selected testers?
It depends on what it depends on what you're trying to do, I guess is what I would say. Yes, there are absolutely highly technical. I think one of them is in he does maybe jamon iberico, and he tests all of the ham that goes through there. He is so highly attuned with it. And during COVID, they put him in bubble wrap to make sure that this guy, he was kind of the one guy that knows that and was well trained. Highly specific, highly, important for what they're doing. Everybody is a little bit different. One of the things that we will do on these panels is, and the reasons why we do some of the training is to know if you're anosmic to something, meaning that you can't pick it up. So we will do these recognition tests, and we will find out this person cannot detect diacetyl, so which is an important thing in fermented products. So that training is important. Anybody can really do it. The question is, how specific do you need the data to be? And that is where that kind of ramps up, and you might get people that are better at their craft.
Wow. All right. So Ken Greenwood, he says, I joined late, so you may have missed it, but could we talk more about QC versus QA? So this is quality control versus quality assurance with respect to the sensory. So he's learned that QA protects the process, or where QC protects the customer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. A lot of the stuff that we've been dealing with is on the QC side. That's where we see the majority of a lot of this work. There are some QA applications. I mean, in reality, sensory is this toolbox that has a lot of different things in it that can be applied in a lot of different places. I would say the majority of everything we've done has been on the quality control side. But there's certainly a lot of different ways that these methods could be used to do on QA. I'm just not familiar with them.
All right. Terry, you have your hand raised. Is there a question that you would like to ask?
Yes. Thanks, Eric. Matt, this was great. I learned a lot. It was fascinating. I have a few questions, but I'll just comment on one and ask one now. First, in follow up to Krista's question on AI. I was listening to a podcast the other day around AI, and they were interviewing the president of a new startup whose specialty was the application of AI in aroma detection. So not flavor, but aroma, smell. And it was fascinating just to hear the science behind it and what they're doing there. So I know, as you mentioned, there's more development going on in this space, but even with aroma detection, there's advancements happening. My question is around taster selection, or when you're putting a panel of tasters together, how you know that they are consistent enough in their evaluations to use them reliably, so that the P chart reflects real changes in the product and not just taster inherent variation from time to time. So I just wonder, like in choosing a taster, do you have them evaluate the same product multiple times to see how consistent they are? Or do you apply the same product to multiple testers to see how consistent multiple people might be before saying, all right, they're now certified to kind of do our evaluations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer to that, again, depends on the company and their needs. And so if we will work with really small companies that only have a few people that are doing it, but every single one of those people is touching the product and moving it forward. So in a lot of ways, we would encourage everybody to be on the taste panel. You can always segment out data later and do different things. So we try to be really inclusive about it and get as many people involved in it as possible, because even just the ability to speak the same language of flavor about those things and to go through some of that training actually has other intrinsic benefits to the company. But that aside, The training that we go through, what we will do is we usually sit people down and have them go through a recognition training. So can they actually recognize our products if they're blind, as in they don't know what it is coming in? And we'll actually test against that. Some of the bigger companies that are more specific, what they'll do is they will validate on certain flavors, meaning that I have been presented lavender 5 times and I have detected lavender 5 times. That's above the threshold for validation, and I can move forward on that. It's a lot of work to do that. So a lot of times is there going to be value to the company for going ahead and doing those things? But you can absolutely go through and try to get as many of those people as possible. I will say anecdotally, the best tasters come from absolutely anywhere. It will surprise you. It could be anyone. And honestly, the best taster is the person that comes there attentive and really wants to do that. And that information is still going to be valuable, even if it's not at like a 5 nines of accuracy. So,
okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the perspective.
Very good.
Eric, if there's time for one other question down the road,
go ahead, Terry.
Come back to me, but I won't ask it now. I'll just pause. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Put your hand back up. We'll get back to you, Terry.
Okay.
All right. So Jim Boyd has some questions here. He sees that R&D is developing electronic tongues to supplement and possibly replace human testers. What do you know about human tongues, and do you think they'll be successful? Is this part of Draught Lab's vision for the future?
So the idea of the electronic tongue has been around for decades. People have been talking about the electronic nose, the electronic tongue, AI as it relates to aroma. Flavor as a whole, aroma would be a part of flavor, in which case there's also taste from the taste buds, which would be the tongue. Those are all things that are advancing and they are getting better. The other question is going to be, what is the availability of that equipment going to be? What is the expense of it? Maybe it will become commoditized down the road. But again, when you look at a lot of these companies and what the makeup of them are, the cheapest and quickest way is going to be to get people to taste and to do, those things. That's where we tend to focus the most, because we feel that that's going to make the biggest difference out there. But absolutely, this stuff is coming along and doing things and helping. But, I will say, again, kind of going back to that analytical versus, sensory, there's companies that are trying to recreate all the best wines in the world based on analytical, these golden tongues and these things. But they actually still get rejected at grocery stores unless there is some sort of a human taste panel that went along with it so that they can validate that these things are still going to be successful. So I don't know where it's all going to go. I think we're all really curious to see what the implication is going to be. I am certainly no different to see kind of where that goes. I'm open to all of it. But for now, people are still tasting things.
All right. And Jim has a question that I also had, and that what happened with the Pepsi challenge? What happened with, New Coke and the failure of New Coke? I mean, what was that all marketing or what happened there?
Good. Well, the Pepsi challenge is actually, it's a sensory test. 2 blind samples. Can you detect which one do you like better? And if we do that enough times, can we, make an ad claim? This is actually another random piece of sensory, is ad claims. If you go out there and you claim you are whatever % better or taste whatever, you actually have to have information to back that up. Otherwise you get sued. And that was a big one with the Pepsi challenge. I don't know. I can't claim to say what happened on all those things, but if I had to venture a guess, when Clear Coke came out, maybe they didn't do all of their research as much as possible. I don't know.
Very, very, very good. So Melinda Goldberg, apparently she's hungry. She says, how does one apply to be a tester or a taster?
Yeah. Well, I even remember when I was younger going to the mall and being recruited for taste tests. That's it right there. That's one of them. A lot of universities will have open calls for taste testers. Cornell has a really great program in sensory, and they're doing things kind of all the time in the area and also through other things. One thing I haven't really even touched on is how this stuff moves down the supply chain. We do a lot of sensory with raw materials, and how those flavors impact flavor in final products. So there's no shortage of need for tasters. And then at the larger companies, yeah, there's people that are tasting ice cream every day. There's a very famous video of a guy with a golden spoon tasting ice cream, licking his lips over and over, being very excited about what he just tasted. So look that one up.
Yeah, there's a good job there.
Yeah.
I also have a question about the distilleries. When you have a 15-year-old Scotch that has been bottled up for all that time, do you have a standard against it? And I guess that's the other question. Humans are very good at comparison. So is this one the same as sample A, the same as sample B? But again, it's, how do you calibrate there? With most of the work I work with, I can trace it back to NIST. I have a NIST traceable standard. With taste, it's again, I don't know, it's all subjective, and how do you come up with a standard? And the Budweiser I drank in college is the same. It has the same taste as I have today that I remember. So
yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, taste is part subjective, part objective. Me saying that something is bitter is me detecting something and saying it out loud. Now, me saying I don't like it and it's bitter, that would be starting to kind of pull in some of those other things. If you talk about aged products, it really depends on what the product is. Fermented beverages for sure change a lot over time. And that is one of the big challenges that they have with the stability of these products, which is one of the reasons why we deal so much in those spaces. So over 15 years, yeah, that flavor component is going to change. Certain things are going to mellow, other things are going to come out, other things in the wood. So the question is, that's why they're tasting it all throughout to basically track these changes as they go. And then at some point, they're also going to do a blend. So they may also early on, they may be tasting all these different barrels because every barrel will have aged differently because of the barrel. And then they need to have in their mind what they want their final product to be, that final taste. And then they'll blend those things together. So distilling, it gets actually pretty complicated. But, there's a lot of other things that are shelf stable that aren't going to change much over time. But it's like taking little flavor measurements over time of what these things are, and then going back and deciding, what do we want this to be? What should it be? And what things can we do to intervene and make changes?
Wow. Yeah, because I imagine some of these really old scotches probably have, their original taster probably is no longer alive by the time it's ready to go there. So a lot of challenges in there.
There is.
Terry, you had another question that you were holding back.
Yes, just one last one, a quick one, Matt. When you look at that value stream you showed from concept to prototype testing and scale up, what would you say is your biggest challenge across that entire value stream that if you were able to resolve, it would really help you with productivity or quality or efficiency? Where's the point of, boy, I wish we could do this a little better?
Yeah. Honestly, if I take that question all the way back to the beginning, which is that 70 to 80% failure rate,
yeah,
that's the thing I want to change the most. And in my opinion, a lot of that is in the work done ahead of time to making sure that you're making something that people want. And even when we went back to making Draught Lab and we're making software, I didn't know anything about sensory. I went and I started sensory programs at local businesses because I needed to know exactly what they wanted, what this needs to be, how this needs to work, and how it needs to work for them, not just how sensory science works and forcing it on them, but how is it need to be adapted so that they can actually adopt it. To me, it's the exact same thing in food and beverage. How can we make it more efficient for them to learn what their customers want and what's going to sell, so that when they get to the scale up and all the other things, which actually you can solve pretty easily and you can kind of run those things, then, everyone's being a lot more successful and there's not as many, things that aren't working. That's where I'd pay attention.
Yeah, the VOC aspect of this, the voice of the customer, is a challenge in the sense that you can't go out there and really ask them what kind of flavors or textures would you like in the future. You almost have to present them a panel and which ones do they favor and which ones don't they? But yeah, I get that, right? That failure rate is intimidating. And if you can reduce that, yeah, you'd be more predictable and stable going forward. Yeah.
And that's where they're hoping AI is also going to help, because maybe we can extrapolate known tastes,
Right.
known flavors, and be able to predict more. However, that model has to be continually trained. So you're still going to have to, I think, get some tastings in there.
Okay. Thank you,
Good
Matt.
question.
Thanks,
Yep.
Eric. One more.
All right, so we have time for a few questions here. Jim Boyd is now just deep in thought of wine, and is asking about the shape of the wine glass. And when you taste something or you're drinking wine, how does the influence of the vessel that you're using would maybe influence taste? Is it?
Yeah, so the vessel itself is going to focus certain things. So especially aroma. So if you think of the bulb, and it allows for the volatiles to come off, and then it's like focusing it almost like a jet engine up at you, which is a great thing. But also for the taster, you have to kind of know a little bit that that's happening. So one of the first things that we'll teach someone not to do is don't bury your nose in there, because you're basically putting your face in the jet engine, right? So you want to kind of keep that thing a little bit far away from you and start to bring it in slowly until the point when you actually start to smell it. And that's going to be the right place. Usually when we're doing our sensory evaluations with wine, there's all sorts of other ways of tasting, and they're all okay. But usually the glass is going to be set up to accentuate the aroma, allow for those volatiles to come off, honestly, to warm up. Beer is served extremely cold here in the United States. That actually lends to flavor not being detected. Cold things, there's less volatiles that are coming off. So you can get away with a product that maybe has some stuff going on if it's super, super cold. So sometimes people will actually warm it up in their hands to get it to a good point. So you're actually getting everything that's coming off of there. But yeah, the vessel is going to be pretty important. You don't want to, out of a can or something really closed off where it can't breathe is going to restrict some things.
And I imagine you have to neutralize the taste too. It's like sometimes you need a cracker, or there's some foods that you would eat to just kind of neutralize or purge the prior material.
100%. A palate cleanser is important. Another weapon of the sensory person to get people to show up is the snack cart. So if you have a lot of things that are there that they can taste in between to clear their palate, and then when they walk away, you give them something nice and sweet, and they get their candy bar or something, then people are pretty happy to participate. But I'll judge the New York State beer competition most every year, and I have to have a whole thing of oyster crackers next to me in order to go from 1 to 1.
Very good. Well, I think other than Melinda has posted her resume or sent it to there, she definitely sees a career in her future as a taster. So you can look forward to that. So we're running out of time. I would just like to remind those folks that are collecting ASQ recertification points that these seminars count. And so if you email me or somehow, I can get you a certification that you can use for your app, for your recertification. And other than that, I think if nothing else, I'm going to turn it back to Jim.
Yep. All right. Well, that was great. So thank you so much, Matt and Eric. Before we sign off, we would appreciate everyone taking a couple minutes just to complete a very short 5-question evaluation survey. Your feedback really helps us a lot on improving our programs and giving us ideas for new programs. There's a link posted in the chat window, and we'll also mail that link out to all the attendees. All right, so we hope that you're leaving today with some ideas that you can use in your organization. We hope that you'll join us for GRQC's and ASQ's upcoming November events. And finally, if you're not already a GRQC member, please consider joining us in our quest to drive quality improvement and operational excellence across the Rochester region. So once again, thank you to Matt Conyer for today's presentation. Thank everyone else for taking
And-
time out of your busy day. And
Thank you, Dick.
Hope you have a great day.
And thank you, Dick, for putting all the technology behind all this to get it to work for us. So, all right, very good. We'll hopefully see you at our upcoming events.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye now.